Imagine waking up one day and realizing you have lived most of your life as a ghost in someone else's story. You were praised, rewarded, even loved for being agreeable, for being good, for making everyone else comfortable. You were the one who never raised your voice, the one who swallowed their opinions like bitter pills, the one who always said yes, even when your body screamed no. People described you as kind, selfless, easy to be around, but deep down, behind that ever-pleasant mask, there's a growing unease, a quiet, unexplainable sense of suffocation. You've done everything right, so why does it still feel wrong? Why does it feel like you're disappearing by degrees until one day you'll vanish entirely? We live in a world that tells us niceness is a virtue. It teaches us to avoid conflict, to stay agreeable, to put others before ourselves. You were likely taught from the earliest years to make peace, not waves, that love is earned through compliance, that being liked is safer than being real. But what if this virtue, this ever-praised niceness, is a beautifully disguised prison? What if, in your pursuit of being good, you've unconsciously become a stranger to yourself? What if the cost of being nice is your identity, your anger, your truth, and eventually, your soul? There's something almost sinister about this paradox, that being loved by others often requires abandoning parts of yourself, that being good in the eyes of society might quietly demand you betray your authenticity, and that behind every chronic people-pleaser is not just a kind soul, but a wounded one. How many times have you laughed at jokes you found offensive, said, "I'm fine," when you were drowning inside, tolerated disrespect to keep the peace, agreed to things you didn't want just to avoid disappointing someone? And here's the question that cuts the deepest. Who are you when no one is watching, when no one needs anything from you? Do you even know? This isn't just about social habits. It's not just about saying yes too much. This is about your psychological survival strategy, the one you developed long ago, often in childhood, to stay safe, to feel seen, to avoid punishment, abandonment, or shame. At first, it worked. Niceness was your armor. Compliance was your shield. But somewhere along the way, the armor fused to your skin, and now, even in moments when you want to scream, cry, rage, or simply say no, "I don't agree," you hesitate, because nice people don't do that. Because if you stop being agreeable, who will love you? Who will stay? What will happen if you finally say what you really feel? This is the haunting trap. The more you deny yourself, the more praise you receive. The more pain you hide, the more others admire your strength. The more you accommodate others, the more you become invisible to yourself. So you keep smiling, keep nodding, keep playing the role. But the truth is clawing at your insides. You know something's not right, and still you hesitate, because the alternative is terrifying. To stop being nice is to risk rejection, conflict, disapproval. To finally set boundaries is to face the possibility that some people may not actually love the real you. They loved the mask, so here you are, live, but half asleep, functioning, but not thriving, adored by many, but unknown to yourself. This isn't just your story. It's a quiet epidemic, an internal war that millions are fighting silently, day after day, smile after smile. So here's the question. What is the true cost of always being nice? What parts of yourself have you traded away in exchange for being liked? And what would it take to finally reclaim them? Because the most dangerous thing about being perpetually nice is that you may not notice you're bleeding until the wound is too deep to hide. But the roots of this run deeper than politeness, deeper than social pressure. To understand the full weight of this hidden cost, we must go back into the psychology of the self, into the teachings of Jung, Nietzsche, and the shadows we were taught to fear. The next layer reveals why this persona exists at all, why the world rewards it and what it's quietly stealing from your soul. You weren't born nice, you were trained to be, molded by reward, by punishment, by subtle cues about what makes you good and what makes you difficult. Somewhere in your early years, maybe when your voice was too loud, your emotions too big, or your needs to inconvenience, someone made it clear, this version of you is easier to love. So, slowly, you edited yourself. You muted the raw parts, buried your anger, dimmed your brilliance, and called it maturity. But it wasn't maturity. It was self-preservation. Psychologist Carl Jung called this the development of the persona, the social mask we wear to adapt to the world around us. The persona isn't inherently bad. In fact, it allows us to function within society. But when we become identified with the mask, when we believe the mask is who we are, we begin to lose access to the deeper, more primal forces within us. And chief among the casualties of this identification is the shadow of the parts of ourselves we were taught to repress: our rage, our sexual energy, our selfishness, our assertiveness, our ambition. But the shadow doesn't disappear. It festers, it waits, and it finds ways to leak out in passive aggression, in burnout, in chronic resentment, in inexplicable emotional fatigue. You see, the nice person isn't just nice, they're split, internally divided between who they are and who they feel they must be. And that split is exhausting, because maintaining a false self takes energy, enormous, draining energy. But it goes deeper than psychology. Let's widen the lens. Friedrich Nietzsche wrote of the slave morality, a value system born from weakness, one that glorifies meekness, humility, and obedience, not because they are virtuous in themselves, but because they serve power structures. In a world where the strong dominate, the weak create a morality that justifies their own survival. Does that sound familiar? Be agreeable, be docile, be humble, don't speak up, don't make others uncomfortable. What if your niceness is not a moral high ground, but a survival tactic inherited from generations of silenced voices? What if your tendency to people please is less about compassion and more about strategic submission? Nietzsche's critique was not against kindness itself, but against inauthentic morality, a morality that emerges not from strength and self-honesty, but from fear, appeasement, and hidden resentment. Now enter Arthur Schopenhauer, who viewed human desire as an endless, tormenting cycle. According to him, we are driven by lack, by an aching need to be validated, to be wanted. Life swings like a pendulum, he wrote, between pain and boredom, and the chronic nice person. They swing between invisible pain and emotional boredom. They suppress pain to be accepted, and then are left with an aching emptiness when that acceptance feels hollow. We've created a culture of surface-level harmony. We reward children for being quiet rather than curious. We praise employees for being team players, even when they're being exploited. We celebrate relationships that never argue, as if silence equals intimacy. But beneath that harmony is an epidemic of self-alienation. Philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre said, "Hell is other people." But perhaps the greater hell is being someone you're not for other people. Let's bring it forward now into modern psychology. Gabor Maté, a physician who spent years working with addiction, trauma, and chronic illness, has spoken extensively about the disease of pleasing. In his research, he found that people who are chronically good, always putting others first, always agreeable, always suppressing their own needs, are more likely to suffer from autoimmune diseases, cancer, and depression. Why? Because the body keeps the score. Because authenticity is not optionally, is a biological necessity. And every time you abandon your truth to preserve a relationship, a job, or an image, your body absorbs the cost. This is the hidden problem. We confuse niceness with goodness. We confuse passivity with peace. We confuse being liked with being whole. But beneath the surface of every chronically nice person is an entire emotional ecosystem unseen, unspoken, and screaming to be heard. Anger, longing, sexuality, rage, grief, powerful forces that don't vanish just because you smile politely. You've been taught to be nice, but you were born to be whole, and yet the world is designed to reward the mask. The job promotions go to the ones who don't cause trouble. The relationships last longer when you avoid difficult conversations. The friendships stay easier when you pretend to agree, so you keep playing the role. But deep inside, your soul is suffocating. What happens when the real you buried for so long finally wants to speak? And more importantly, what are the unseen consequences of never letting that voice be heard? Because the pain doesn't vanish. It just evolves into something harder to name, harder to see, and infinitely harder to escape. You think you're protecting others, keeping the peace, being kind. But what if, all along, your niceness is slowly destroying the very things you're trying to preserve? You smile, say yes, comply. You become the glue that holds things together, the safe one, the predictable one. But no one sees what it's costing you because not even you have fully looked. Let's go deeper. What happens to someone who swallows their truth for too long? Where does the rage go? The unmet needs, the unseen self. It doesn't disappear. It curdles, it mutates. It becomes resentment, not the fiery vocal kind, but the slow dripping, silent kind. The kind that turns into chronic fatigue, migraines, digestive issues. The kind that shows up as apathy in relationships, emotional numbness, a dull ache that no one can quite diagnose. You see it in the mother who never takes time for herself and snaps at her children with guilt-laced anger. You see it in the friend who agrees with everyone, then quietly withdraws, feeling hollow and unappreciated. You see it in the employee who never sets boundaries till they finally burn out, quit, or explode. This is what Gabor Maté calls the repression of authenticity in service of attachment. It's not that you want to lie. It's that on some deep, primal level, your nervous system believes that being real equals being rejected. So you trade truth for acceptance, again and again, until you forget there was ever a difference. Longer you wear the mask, the more people relate to the mask, not you. So even when you are loved, it feels counterfeit, because deep down, you know they don't know who you really are. That's the paradox. The more you try to be liked, the more alone you become. Because no one can love a version of you that doesn't truly exist. But the cost doesn't stop at the individual. It infects the collective. Society rewards surface-level harmony. Our institutions, workplaces, schools, even families often value compliance over creativity, silence over truth, comfort over growth. Children are punished for speaking up. Employees are told to be team players even when they're exploited. Romantic partners are encouraged to compromise even when it kills their authenticity. So we build a culture of polite resentment, smiles on the outside, contempt underneath. A global performance of emotional dishonesty. Think of the last time you were in a room full of people and felt utterly alone. Think of how many relationships end not with betrayal, but with years of unspoken needs. Think of the colleague who always agrees in meetings, but whose passive aggression poisons every interaction. These are the ghosts of a society addicted to niceness, not real kindness, not real care, but the curated, polished, Instagram-filtered facade of pleasantness that keeps us digestible and unthreatening. And it comes at a staggering cost. We lose depth, we lose intimacy, we lose ourselves. Because here's the dark truth most people won't say out loud. Nice people are often the most dishonest, not out of malice, but out of fear. They lie by omission. They say yes when they mean no. They flatter when they feel frustration. They hide their discontent under 100 polite phrases. And the worst part, they often don't even realize they're lying. They've confused kindness with self. They think emotional safety means never being disruptive. They've convinced themselves that peace means silence and love means pleasing. But real peace only grows in the soil of truth. And love without honesty is just performance. Let's take this into the body. Neuroscience shows us that suppressing emotions, especially anger and fear, activates the stress response system. Cortisol rises, inflammation increases, the immune system weakens. Chronic niceness doesn't just affect your relationships. It literally rewires your brain. It teaches your nervous system that your needs are threats, something to hide, to bury, to apologize for. So your internal world becomes a battlefield. One part of you screaming for expression, another part desperate to be liked. And the noise of this war, this inner dissonance, is what leads to chronic anxiety, depression, even illness. Your nervous system isn't malfunctioning. It's trying to tell you something. You're not anxious because you're broken. You're anxious because you're betraying yourself in small daily ways. So ask yourself, what am I not saying? What am I tolerating that's killing me quietly? Whose love am I afraid to lose if I finally speak my truth? Because there's a hidden cruelty in being nice all the time. You rob others of the chance to know you. You rob yourself of the chance to be known, and in the end, you may win the approval of the world, but lose the only relationship that ever truly mattered, the one with yourself. But what if there's another way? A way to be kind and honest, compassionate and fierce, authentic and deeply connected? What if the rebellion isn't in becoming cold or selfish, but in becoming whole? To find out, we must break the rules you were taught about being good. We must explore the uncomfortable art of saying no, of disappointing others, of being misunderstood, and still choosing truth over approval. Because only when you stop trying to be liked by everyone can you finally be loved by someone, including yourself. You were not meant to be agreeable. You were meant to be alive, to feel, to rage, to love, to speak, to say yes from the depths of your soul and no with equal clarity and power. But somewhere along the way, you were trained out of that. You were taught that to be loved, you must be pleasing, that your authenticity was too much, that your boundaries were obstacles, that your needs were inconveniences, so you became nice. But now, something inside you is waking up, and it doesn't want to be liked. It wants to be real. This is the rebellion, not one of fire and destruction, but of honesty and embodiment. A rebellion against emotional suppression, against compulsive people-pleasing, against the quiet lies we tell ourselves to keep from being rejected. But rebellion is never easy, because the first boundary you must set is with yourself. You have to unlearn decades of programming. You have to look in the mirror and ask, who am I when I'm not performing? What would I say if I wasn't afraid of being abandoned? What does my truth sound like, feel like, taste like, when I finally let it out? This isn't about becoming aggressive or cruel. It's about becoming clear. Clear in your yes, clear in your no, clear in your values, your limits, your desires, because clarity is love. And boundaries are not walls, they are the architecture of intimacy. You were taught that nice equals safe, but it's a false safety because it depends on never revealing who you really are. Real safety is built when your truth can be expressed and still held with love. So how do you begin this rebellion? Step 1. Get intimate with your anger. Not the rage that explodes, but the quiet fire beneath your people-pleasing. Anger is not evil. It's your internal alarm system. It tells you when something is off, when a boundary has been crossed, when your needs are being neglected. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." The irritation you feel when someone asks too much of you, the resentment that builds when you say yes too often, that's your shadow knocking. Not to be feared, but integrated. Start small, feel it, listen to it, let it inform you. Step 2. Practice saying no without explanation. Most people pleasers have been trained to justify every no, to soften it with 1,000 apologies. But no is a complete sentence. You don't owe anyone an emotional PowerPoint presentation on why your energy matters. Saying no is an act of self-respect, and yes, people might be disappointed. That's okay. Disappointment is not a crisis. It's part of being in a real relationship. You are not responsible for managing other people's emotions at the cost of your own truth. Step 3. Let people misunderstand you. This may be the hardest pill to swallow, because niceness is often a shield against misinterpretation. We want to be seen as kind, generous, cooperative, but in truth, we fear being misjudged. Here's a truth bomb. You can speak with the utmost clarity and love and still be misunderstood. Not because you did something wrong, but because others are hearing you through the filter of their own wounds. Your job is not to be understood by everyone. Your job is to be honest with yourself. Step 4. Surround yourself with people who can hold your truth. When you stop being nice, some people will fall away. Let them. They weren't in love with you. They were in love with your compliance. But others, rare golden souls, will emerge. The ones who say, "Thank you for telling me." The ones who don't shrink when you speak your boundaries. The ones who don't just tolerate your fullness, but invite it. Your authenticity will scare some, and attract others. Let it be the filter. Step 5. Redefine what it means to be good. Goodness is not self-erasure. Goodness is not martyrdom. Goodness is not setting yourself on fire to keep others warm. True goodness includes honesty, clarity, even disruption, when necessary. There is more compassion in a firm truth than in a dishonest smile. Nietzsche wrote, "You have your way. I have my way. As for the right way, the correct way, and the only way does not exist." So stop chasing the perfect persona. Start chasing what's real, even if it's messy, even if it's misunderstood, because the world doesn't need more nice people. It needs more authentic people. People willing to be kind and confrontational, tender and unshakable, empathic and self-honoring. This is your invitation, not to burn bridges, but to stop walking over them on your knees. You do not owe anyone a diluted version of yourself, not your parents, not your friends, not your partner, not your boss, not the internet. Your real self is waiting, not the performance, not the projection, but the wild, full, tender truth that has been sitting quietly in your chest for years, hoping one day you'd let it speak. That day is now, but even rebellion is not the end. Beyond it lies something even deeper, a truth so powerful it can reframe your entire life, your suffering, your relationships, and your identity. There comes a moment when the performance begins to rot, when the mask, so carefully shaped to fit the world's expectations, becomes too heavy to bear. You start to realize the applause isn't worth the emptiness. You've played the role flawlessly. You were the helper, the healer, the easy one, the one who never needed much. And in return, you were given praise, acceptance, perhaps even love. But now you see it. What they loved wasn't you. It was your usefulness, your silence, your self-denial. And here, in this painful clarity, a deeper truth begins to surface. Not angry, not loud, but steady, ancient-like, something your soul always knew, but was too afraid to say aloud. You were never meant to be nice. You were meant to be whole, not broken into pieces that fit neatly into other people's lives. Not shaped into 1,000 versions of yourself to avoid rejection, but undivided, unapologetic, fully human. And that's the truth the world rarely tells you, that your authenticity was never the threat. Your suppression was. They say if you show people who you really are, they might leave. But here's the secret. When you don't show them who you are, they never really arrive. They fall in love with the mask and you live with the haunting ache of being surrounded, but still alone. To be fully loved, you must first be fully seen. And to be fully seen, you must stop hiding. No more diluted yeses. No more performing peace while dying inside. No more smiling through self-betrayal. This isn't about becoming selfish or hard. It's about becoming true. And that truth will cost you. Let's not romanticize it. It will cost you approval. It will cost you comfort. It might cost you relationships that were only held together by your silence. But what you gain in return is something sacred, yourself. When you stop betraying yourself to please others, you begin to discover a new kind of peace. Not the fragile kind that depends on never upsetting anyone, but the grounded, sovereign kind that comes from knowing, I am not here to be convenient. I am here to be real. That shift, that reclamation of your truth, that is the soul's revolution. It's not flashy. No one may notice at first, but it's seismic. You begin to walk differently, speak differently. You take up space without apology. You stop asking for permission to exist, and people will notice. Some will resist, others will resent it. But a few, those who are awake enough to recognize truth, will celebrate it. They'll say, "There you are. I see you now." There is no going back. Once you taste the power of speaking your truth, not out of anger, but out of self-respect, not to hurt, but to honor, you begin to understand something no one ever taught you. You were not put here to be palatable. You were put here to be powerful, and that power is not loud or performative. It's quiet, rooted, relentless. It's in the way you say no without guilt. It's in the way you stop apologizing for needing space. It's in the way you tell the truth even when your voice shakes. This is the death of the nice person, and the birth of something far more sacred, a human being in alignment, honest, integrated, alive. Think of all the energy you've wasted trying to be accepted, the years you spent suppressing your voice, your desires, your boundaries. What if that energy was never meant to be spent on approval, but on transformation? What if the deepest act of love is not saying yes to others, but saying yes to yourself? You were taught to be liked. Now it's time to be free. Let the discomfort come. Let the old narratives crack and crumble. Let people misjudge you. Let relationships shift. Let it all fall away until only what's true remains. That's the foundation. Not performance, not perfection, presence. Because the most radical act in a world obsessed with image is to be real. So here is your final invitation. Stop trying to be digestible. Stop editing your soul to be more likable. Stop betraying yourself in the name of harmony. Instead, speak when it's easier to stay quiet. Say no when it's terrifying. Feel what you've buried. Ask for what you need, even if your voice trembles. Let yourself be big. Let yourself be bold. Let yourself be seen. You will lose things, but you will gain something far greater: your voice, your integrity, your life. Because in the end, being nice might win you a place in other people's stories, but only truth will give you your own. And that is worth everything.